Hey, Dr. Dan Cooper here, and I have a question from the crowd that I kind of hear a lot, and I'm pretty excited to give you some answers to it because it is something that I hear really often. So I think it's something that will be of value to throw out into the ether here. So the question I got has to do with uh, physicality and physicality as we age. So somebody asked me, "What do I do?" And this person, so 57-year-old male. He's describing low energy, decrease in muscle mass, admittedly lots of stress, and as an ancillary, he also mentions to me that he used to be an athlete. So I will say one thing about that last piece first, that someone who's been in a high degree of physical fitness in the past, it's tough. This is tough because when you know that you've been at some high state of awesomeness in the past, and then you find yourself wherever you are now that is somewhere below that, it's really tough for somebody like that to get back into fitness without just trying to go right back to where they were when they were at their peak. And so I understand that it's really just a mental block. It's not anything physical that they have to overcome. It's just that mental piece of, man, well, I know I used to be able to do this. I should just go to that. One of the issues that goes along with that is the fact that you're going to be sore as hell, and that might keep you from continuing to progress forward, or you might get injured. So what that person sounds like to me is somebody who's experiencing andropause, more than likely. Hypercortisolemia just means you're stressed out, too much cortisol, and that has a cascade of effects that would result in low energy, decreased muscle mass, and possibly even additional abdominal adiposity, belly fat. And it kind of sounds like this person, and I actually know this person, so some adding in some things I know about some additional lifestyle factors that are in play. It's a wellness lifestyle that's, I don't know if I'd say it's in the toilet, but it's not running on all cylinders like it should. So if you want to have a wellness lifestyle that keeps you looking and feeling your best throughout life, you need to throw some things together. The first thing I'll mention with this sort of case is to start a movement practice. Something about doing something physical first, it really brings everything else into focus, because now you're doing something that you can feel. You can feel when you're sore. You can feel when you're uncoordinated feeling. So you can feel all these things that give you a benchmark. So how do I improve from here? Some people, it's also very motivating as well when you feel the soreness and the burn from doing some sort of exercise practice. With that though, consistency, crazy important. So something that happens with someone who has fallen out of an athletic lifestyle is that you've now developed all these habits that don't include fitness. So you have to now reintroduce fitness habits and then do them enough so that they become actual habits that are easy to continue without a lot of willpower, because willpower only lasts so long. So you put in the willpower in the beginning to create repeatable systems and processes that are habits, and then you just become autopilot on those once they become ingrained. So consistency, and be progressive. Don't jump into, like I mentioned, jump into that stage where you think you should be at because you have a memory of you in the past. Start with stability. So coordination and stability are going to carry you through the rest of the path of getting into kick-ass fitness. So this could be something as simple as a 30-minute yoga routine in the morning. Now, there's a few things that go along with a yoga routine in particular, or any sort of mindful movement practice that benefit some of the other factors I'm going to talk about in a second. But what we want to do is create a strong motor engram, so that mental patterning or cognitive patterning of movement patterns that are solid, they're effective, they're efficient, and you have some strong ability to do it without failing mid-movement. So that's where something that is gentle but very focused in its movement really plays in really well for this sort of thing. So yoga, tai chi, there's tons of things. Let's see. So stability and coordination is the first priority, and then we get into progressive overload. So once you feel stable, you feel confident in the movement you're doing, and you've gotten past that initial annoying sore stage where things just hurt because you haven't done them in a long time, and you've gained enough flexibility to go through full ranges of those movements, then it's time to load. And we want a progressive overload. Don't just jump straight to that highest level you want to be at. The way that we want to structure our movement over progressive overloads is such that it's the highest degree of intensity that you can do perfectly. So what that means is, and so intensity equals either like total load, which is the weight that you're using. I kind of hesitate with that because it depends on what you're doing. You might not be loading a barbell. You might be doing something else that's just not poundage oriented. But the amount of strain involved, so you're progressively overloading that, but also the complexity. So as you overload, you're overloading two factors: the actual load and then the complexity of the movement. So if you do them both at the same time or too fast with both of them, you might surpass your ability to do it perfectly. And I mentioned this, and I kind of harp on this a little bit because every time we're doing anything, we're creating and or just strengthening neural patterns. And so you want to create these neural patterns that are effective and efficient for correctness sake, but also so you don't get hurt. When you have good movement patterns, you can do them for life, and they don't wear out joints, they don't damage tissues. You just are resilient and durable in the movements, and that's what you want for lifelong movement practice. So test yourself, either increase the complexity or increase the load, and test yourself to make sure you can do it very well. Saying perfectly is kind of ridiculous, but very well. And if you can, awesome. Go to where you can't. Where you can't do it perfectly or really well, then take it down a notch, and that's your practice point. Then in whatever period you designate, test it again, increase it, and then test that again and see if you can increase. If you can't, continue where you're at. If you can, then you increase that load or complexity to the point at which you fail, and come down one notch, and that's where you practice. So that's how you're stepping through your increases in ability. Part of this was so andropause. I mentioned that word just means the shift in androgenic hormones away from that youthful vibrance of high testosterone and growth hormone that's awesome with youth. So you can slow that downward slide of andropause, and there's a number of things you can do. So people like to jump on what supplement can I take, and there are supplements you can take that can help with this. I would suggest that you do lifestyle habits first, because if you have lifestyle habits that are really good, and then you add in the chemical components, the nutrients of whether it's foods or supplementation, then it's going on into a system that's already running efficiently. It just works better. So some lifestyle habits to increase testosterone. So we have get your glycemic control under control. So all that really means is decrease carbohydrate load, because if you have hyperglycemia, that just means too much blood sugar. If you're diabetic or pre-diabetic, if you're one of those, that's farther on the other end of the spectrum of poor glycemic control, testosterone tanks. If you just have too high of blood sugar, but it's not necessarily diabetic level yet, it's still damaging your testosterone production. So now I'm going to hesitate again. You don't have to go keto. Depends on just your life, how you respond to things, what kind of exercise you're doing, how much total carbohydrate load you're going to do. But decreasing it helps. Another thing that is related to diet that is associated here with regulating hormonal control is time-restricted eating, also called intermittent fasting. If your leptin and ghrelin, these are just two hunger and satiety hormones, if they get out of control, then you're then using willpower again to control your appetite, and it's just not great. It also resets your insulin sensitivity, so having higher insulin sensitivity is far better than not, as it relates to testosterone production as well. So decrease carbohydrate load, bring to the point at which you can still perform well, but no more than that, and start playing with this. I don't know if I'd start with this, but it's whatever pattern you want to do. There's a lot of things you can do, and you kind of pick what you do when you do it. But add these in at some point. The intermittent fasting, and so you'll hear people say like I'm an 18 and 6. They give you these numbers. So a great place to start would be, if you're not into intermittent fasting at all, like you eat until you go to bed and then you eat right when you wake up, you're probably at an 8-hour fast and a 16-hour eating window. You want to shrink your eating window, increase your fasted window. So if I say I'm at 12-12, that means I'm fasting for 12 hours, and then my eating window is 12 hours. So from the moment I take my first bite to the moment I take my last bite, that's my eating window. If you can shrink that to 8 hours, there's a lot of hormonal benefits that go along with shrinking your feeding window to 8 hours. What else is in here? For lifestyle habits, that was a lot on dietary strategies. There's some physical strategies, and we're talking about somebody who's complaining about muscle mass loss, and a great way to increase the muscle mass is freaking working out. So how do we do that? Are we going to go on long runs, some long moderate intensity exercises? No, we're not. Especially when you have somebody who's admittedly hyper stressed, because cortisol is produced and maintained with these long endurance type exercises. So things will boost testosterone as well as growth hormone, which is great because that's a very rejuvenative hormone as far as your tissue recovery. Heavy lifts, heavy complex lifts, especially like deadlifts, squats, those sorts of things. And high intensity interval training. One caveat to high intensity interval training is that if you're going to do it, your periods between training sessions can't be too close. You need to make sure that you're getting complete recovery between all your high intensity sessions, or else the cortisol starts to jump up. And cortisol is something we're trying to reduce when we're considering increasing our testosterone production. Let's see, have some sex. That's another great one. That's a fun one too. So, and I would say, there's a lot of information about frequency and how frequent is ideal for testosterone boosting. You'll notice that if you have sex or just ejaculate, you might be by yourself, but do that and then try and go work out. It's low, and that's because you have a drop in testosterone right after ejaculation. So I have found that between 3 and 7 days between sessions puts me at a pretty great testosterone level. I'm feeling motivated. I've got pop. I've got power. So you can play with that duration. If you're once a month, once every 6 months, you need to be more frequent. If you're twice a day, you might be depleting the testosterone. You can't actually catch up. So play with your frequency to optimize testosterone that way. De-stress, man. Stress crushes testosterone production. It crushes your immune system. Stress is a really damage. So I'm talking about emotional stress. I guess other types of stress as well, but in particular, I'm thinking emotional stress when I talk about this. It destroys so many things. So in this conversation, find stress mitigation techniques that work for you. There's things that work for me that I know and I love. Like, I'm a super nature kind of guy. If I go outside and I play in the dirt, I look at bugs, I catch lizards. I'm in Florida. I do things like that, or I listen to the wind in the leaves. That's a really good zen spot for me. I de-stress immediately. There's something out of Japan. I need to look up the name of this thing because I keep forgetting it. But the translation is forest bathing. This is actually prescribed in Japan for stressful conditions. And so people just go out and be in nature. The smells that are produced from the leaves and the barks and the dirt, they go in and they're a sensory experience. The color variations that happen with dappled light of the sun filtering through the leaves, a sensory experience that is primal in nature. These primal experiences are de-stressing. Even if you're barefoot, you're grounding. Like, there's so many things about being in nature and like really fully immersing yourself in nature that are distressing. So throw that into your life too, if that's a path you like. But some stress mitigation techniques that work for you. Breathing techniques are very common. Visualization techniques, progressive relaxation. There's a number of things. And from a nutrient standpoint, if you're zinc deficient, you're not producing testosterone at anywhere near optimal levels. So make sure you're not zinc deficient. Some foods like pumpkin seeds are higher in zinc. Oysters. I should have looked this up before I mentioned this, but so some of the shellfish are high in zinc. Bison is high in zinc. I'm pretty sure liver is another good one. So be zinc sufficient. And with this situation, now we're talking about somebody who's coming back from a period of time where they have been I don't want to say not physically active at all, because that's not really the case, but not fitness minded and fitness focused in their lifestyle habits. If that's the case, make sure your recovery game is on point. This is really for anybody, but getting somebody back on track, you really want things to be idealized so that there's no failure and like too much soreness, like get an injury, things that will kick somebody out of getting a routine landed. So make sure the recovery game is on point, because it'll keep you from being as sore as long. It will idealize the tissue recovery, so muscle recovery, muscle growth, all of those things. It helps you sleep better. Like there's so many things that go along with your recovery game. And when I say recovery game, these are some of the things I'm talking about. So we have the nutrition side of things. You want to make sure you are nutrient sufficient so that you can supply all the substrates necessary to build the body. And decrease excessive inflammation. Now, there's going to be an inflammatory reaction to working out, and that's good, but you don't want it to be an excessive long-term inflammatory response. So if you look up anti-inflammatory diet, there are some rules that go along with that. I'll do separate, and I've already done separate videos on that, and maybe I'll do one in the future too. Your sleep, man, is sleep important? So from a lot of angles. So just from the angle of the tissue recovery that occurs during sleep, you want to maximize that. But then we have circadian rhythms. So circadian rhythms, and our sleep is a daily circadian rhythm we're talking about. If you are idealizing your sleep pattern, your sleep quality, your sleep times, so when do I start sleeping, when do I end sleeping? Because there are ingrained ideal patterns of hormone flow throughout our day. And so if you can match your schedule to be that, which is really easy, going to bed at or before 10 o'clock, and waking up around 6 o'clock. So 10 to 6 is your ideal growth hormone and testosterone secretion period. So making sure you're asleep during those periods is ideal. Because our whole conversation here is idealizing those hormones. Plus, if you're not asleep, there's higher cortisol production, and cortisol and growth hormone counter each other. So if you're having high cortisol, you're having low growth hormone. If you can bring your cortisol down, growth hormone will increase. So that's another reason we want to be asleep during this 10 to 6 window, so that we can keep the cortisol minimized, so the growth hormone has the ability to maximize its secretion. Your mobility. So this is another component of recovery, and it's not just stretching. When I say mobility, there's two things that go along with mobility. It's flexibility. So how much actual tissue extensibility do I have? And then the control over that range of motion. So if you're super flexible, you just bang your leg up over your head. But if I held it and said push against me, you couldn't even contract it at all. That's not control over a range of motion. That's just being flexible. And that actually puts your joints at risk, because when you have the ability to get into a position but you don't have an ability to control it, it's unsafe for the joint. So the joint itself has to take a lot of the load instead of the muscles taking the load. So your mobility game, and that has to do with some of the way we talked about starting this whole process off with starting with things that are stability oriented and muscle and motor coordination oriented. So same kind of deal. So as you're doing your stretching routines, I would add in dynamic and movement stretching routines where you're actually like transitioning from position to position under control. You're not just like getting to a position and hanging on your joints and stretching and stretching the tissues, but actually transitioning into movement, different positions with focused intention and control. Because then you have access to all the control points along that movement path. And then idealize the parasympathetic nervous system. So we have two sides to the nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic is that fight or flight side of the nervous system. The moniker for parasympathetic is the rest and digest side of the nervous system. That's where recovery really happens. And there's things you can do to idealize parasympathetic nervous system. And really it's just chilling out. So all the things I mentioned already about finding stress mitigation techniques that work for you, you got to do those. When you do them, it brings you into that rest and digest side of the nervous system that repairs tissues. And that's really what I've got for you. Don't go crazy and jump to a level that you wish you could be at or remember yourself being at in the past, because you're just going to set yourself up for failure, whether that's catastrophic failure of big injuries or just too much soreness you don't really want to continue. Because consistency is super important. So do a progressive introduction into movement, starting with stability and coordination, and then progressing through your overload. Make sure your glycemic control is on point and your circadian rhythms are idealized, and you will be into some studly shape before you know it. I love the questions. So hit me in comments. You can send me messages. You can DM. However you want to get in touch with me. Ask me questions. I love answering them. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and this was helpful for you. See you next time.